So hello friends, welcome to this month's Sweet Taste of HeartScapes. This is a monthly free class that I offer for our community of Reiki practitioners, Reiki curious folks, and just really anybody who walks in the door and wants to spend a little bit of time in practice and in learning. My name is Michaela. I've been a Reiki practitioner for about 10 years, a Reiki teacher for about 6 years, and started Heartscapes about at the same time I started teaching. And in that time, it's been really important to me to incorporate practices and principles from other aspects of my life into my Reiki practice. And that is part of the origins of doing this work with trauma-informed Reiki, as well as bringing in a social justice lens to the work that I do, and is a big reason why I practice Reiki, primarily from the perspective of its Japanese origins. We won't be talking a whole lot about what that means in this class, but if you're curious about that, there's a whole lot of content about what that means and being in the practice of Reiki from its Japanese origins on my YouTube channel and in these past recordings of this class. So first, we are Reiki people, we are Reiki practitioners, or we are Reiki curious. And I hope for most of us, that means that we like to be in practice. That is certainly how I like to operate. So I want us to begin by dropping into just a little bit of practice together that will help us call our attention here, even if we are doing other things, even if we're doing laundry, even if we're driving. Let's call our attention here as much as we can, and just to kind of help set our mindset for our content today. And so wherever you are, if you can take a pause and just drop into some breaths with us, if you are driving or active in this moment, as much as you can, just coming into this moment of presence. And so for us, that always means bringing into alignment the three parts of ourselves that are really our gateway into the world. And that's through our body, through our mind, and through our breath. And so adjusting our body in a position that feels comfortable and well supported, where you can feel easeful and upright, really relying on the structure of your body, which is built like the mountain, stable at the bottom and rising elegantly up from that base. So whatever you need to do to create a comfortable, stable, supportive base. And as you settle into this new position, posture for practice, I invite you to bring your breath into this posture by resting your attention on the sensation of your breath, letting your belly be soft and relaxed, relaxing into that structure so that your belly can expand with your inhale naturally, making a little bit more space inside for your breath. And as you inhale, just resting your attention on your breath, calling your attention back from all the places you've spent it today, resting on the breath and coming inward, following your breath in and down into your belly. And as you allow your body to settle and relax, making more space for your breath, making room for your breath to come in and down, all the way down into your belly, resting your attention on your breath. This brings your mind into this posture, your focus, your attention, calling it back from everywhere it's been spent and bringing your mind in and down, resting your attention in your belly. Let's take a few breaths here, seeing if you can find the place just below your belly button, deep into the center of your body. And just rest your focus here for a couple of rounds of breath. And then from this centered place, this restful place, this grounded place, going to invite us into a little bit of a visualization, a bit of an imagination. I want you to imagine or to think of a time, either in your memory or in your imagination, when you have come to an expert, a practitioner of some kind, perhaps a doctor or other medical professional, perhaps a wellness professional like a Reiki practitioner or a chiropractor, perhaps a veterinarian or even a car mechanic, somebody who is an expert in their field, an authority in this topic, and you have come to them for help about something that matters to you. They are the expert in the room about this subject, and you are the expert in the room about your experience, about how you're experiencing the problem or the situation that you've brought to them, and about the outcome that you desire. Two experts coming together to solve a problem. And I want you to imagine that this practitioner regards you as an expert of your own experience, asking you questions and giving you space to ask yours, respecting your responses, asking your permission, asking for your consent before engaging in any remedy, making sure you understand what is happening and what is going to happen as well as they can. Offering modifications and options for you to align best with your needs, your values, your comfort. And sharing challenging information in a compassionate way. And as you imagine this scene, this scenario, I invite you to notice how it feels to be regarded in this way. Notice how it feels in your body and in your mind. Just taking 3 more breaths here as you notice these things. Welcome, Karma. We're just at the tail end of a bit of a meditation dropping in. And then I invite you to take another couple of rounds of breath and following your exhale back out into the room and into this circle. So friends, as you come back, I'd love to invite you to share by dropping in the chat or even jumping off of mute what you noticed, how it felt to imagine the scenario that we just walked through. Tina, you feel safe. Yeah, friends, feel free to drop in the chat what comes up for you as you think about this scenario. And I'm just going to pull up some slides for us while you do that. How else does that feel, or do you imagine that feels? Heard. Yeah, we all need to be heard when we're dealing with something important, something that matters to us. I mean, we need to be heard in the mundane things too, but especially when it matters. Yeah, good. So I won't go into a lot of storytelling about how I came to creating this material, but just in brief, my history, my work history before starting HeartScapes and devoting myself full-time to teaching and sharing the system of Reiki was in higher education and social justice leadership. And in that context, I was really privileged to be able to receive a lot of training across a wide range of fields. And when I did my teacher training for holding spaces like this, we spent a lot of time focused on trauma-informed care. And prior to that time, I had begun learning Reiki This is about 10 years ago. And I had a few experiences in those early months of the first year or so that confused me and that I didn't understand until I was being trained in the perspective of trauma-informed care. And what I realized is that there were moments when I had done something or observed something in a Reiki session that had caused much more distress for the person that I was working with or that I was observing than seemed normal or called for in the situation. And I was confused by that. And what I now know is that that person had been triggered in some way around something that felt traumatic to them. And I did not know how to create a container of safety around that kind of a situation. And so as I've moved into, teaching Reiki over the past 6 years, it's been really important to me to bring a trauma-informed perspective into that work. I have observed that this perspective is being much better understood and taught and disseminated within the worlds of yoga, of meditation, of other forms of body work and in medical spaces that hadn't really filtered into the world of Reiki yet. At least not in a robust way. And there are some particular concerns that are specific to practicing Reiki that I felt really warranted a specific something for us. And so I created that something, which is a class called Cultivating a Trauma-Informed Perspective and Trauma-Informed Reiki. Cultivating a Trauma-Informed Reiki Practice. Ha, that's it. Which I've taught for a couple of years now. And this class that you're sitting in right now is kind of a taster of that longer class. So let's jump right in. So when we talk about what it means to hold a trauma-informed space for ourselves, for our clients, for our colleagues, for anybody that we're really working with, we don't need to know whether or not a person is walking in with trauma. We don't need to ask about that. We can create a container that accounts for that possibility. And the qualities of that container, the foundation of that container, is that it creates a sense of safety, the ability for the person to trust, to offer informed choices to them so that they can give explicit consent. So we've made explicit requests for their consent, and that therefore gives them a sense of control over their experience. Now, that's not to say that we can't create spontaneous moments within our sessions or that can't be mystery involved. That's actually one of the very particular things about bringing a trauma-informed lens into a Reiki practice, is that in a certain sense, we often work with the mystery. And that absolutely can still be present, even when we give folks a sense of control over their experience. So I'd love to invite you all to share again in the chat what comes up for you when you think about what it means to provide trauma-informed care. Now, this might come from your own experience. You might have some training in this. I'm going to go ahead and assume that this room that we're in right now, both the people here who are live and those who are watching on the recording, that you have some level of connection, some level of experience to draw from that we can all learn from. So I really encourage you to share in the chat what comes up for you as we go along. And starting with, what does trauma-informed care mean to you? So I've shared what it means to me, this list here. I'd love to know what it means to you. And welcome, Nadine. So let's just begin. I'm actually going to jump past the APA and actually just focus here on this description of what is trauma from Dr. Pat Ogden, who is a professional who works a lot in these kinds of trainings for people in a wide range of wellness and medical and therapeutic jobs. And she describes trauma as any threatening, overwhelming experiences that we cannot integrate. That important word, integrate. After such experiences, we're often left with a diminished sense of security with others and in the world, and a sense of feeling unsafe inside of our own skin. And so living in a vulnerable body in a challenging world brings many, many frightening, difficult, threatening, painful experiences to our lives. That's just a reality of our life. And our system, our body, our mind, our brain, is designed to help us to integrate, to metabolize, to literally digest those experiences and to bring us back to a sense of baseline, of neutrality, of okayness. There's many processes in our body and in our brain, in our heart, in our mind, that help us to do that, to integrate the difficult, painful, frightening experiences that are part of life. But sometimes, through a wide range of circumstances, we are unable to integrate or digest those experiences, and they stay with us. And that is what we call trauma or embedded trauma. Let me just take a look at chat here. So non-judgment as being part of trauma-informed care. Absolutely. Seeing the situation through a lens of compassion and a need to understand, for sure. Coming from knowledge or experience of trauma, absolutely, right? There's specific information that even if we, so this is an additive thing, right? We're going to add all of these together. And then Tina says, my client and myself have the right to say no, to stop in a safe and non-judgmental space. Absolutely. So if we add all of these things together, right, we come from a compassionate, non-judgmental space and a need and a desire to understand. And then we add to that inherent compassion, which I assume we all bring to the table as Reiki professionals or Reiki curious folk. We add to that knowledge. And that's what I did not have in my early days. I had the compassion, I had the desire to understand, to do good, to be non-judgmental, but there was certain knowledge I did not have. And that's what I'm aiming to share with us. So this graphic, we're not going to dive too much into this, but I want to just name this tool, which is the window of tolerance. I am completely blanking right now on the name of the psychologist who developed this tool. I apologize to him. Usually it's right at the tip of my tongue, but it's just not there right now. It'll come to me later. But the window of tolerance basically describes the space where we feel okay and in control of ourselves. So we feel integrated at the very center of our window of tolerance. We're in our optimal state. We're at our best. We're able to access our thoughts and emotions. We're able to, give ourselves clear directive, make decisions. We're mentally engaged. As we move out to the edges of our window of tolerance, we get less integrated. We start to lose that optimal state. We start to disengage our thoughts and our emotions or our thoughts in our body. And once we tip out of our window of tolerance altogether, this is where we start to be, we're no longer able to think and to grow and to change, because we need to push our window of tolerance a little bit to change, to grow. Discomfort is definitely part of changing, learning, and growing. But once we tip out of that window of tolerance altogether and go into either hyperarousal or hypoarousal, this is where we shut down and we go into our nervous system, and we go into our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. In that space, we can no longer really learn, integrate, grow, sometimes even make good decisions. We've at that point, we need an intervention to get ourselves back into the window of tolerance. I want to just pause right there, because if we think back to that scenario that we started with the meditation, where we're imagining this, very trauma-informed approach to working with a professional. If we think about some of the aspects of that experience, right? We're asked for consent, for example, before a procedure is done. We're given many options, we're given information. If we think about the opposite of that, and unfortunately, I just want to acknowledge many of us, including myself, have had experiences with professionals who are an expert in something, who is there to give us care around something that matters, where they don't consider us an expert on our own experience. They consider themselves the only expert in the room. And perhaps they make assumptions that it's okay to simply proceed with a procedure, such as drawing blood or, touching us in some way, or taking our pet from us to go into the back to do a procedure without asking permission. Perhaps they don't give us an opportunity to ask good questions, or they don't give us thorough information. So what happens to our nervous system when we're confronted with that? A situation that might already be producing anxiety or fear, distress, and then we're regarded in that way. Think about what happens in our nervous system, right? We start to get a little bit more nervous. Our heart rate starts to rise. And if we get to a place where we're really feeling unsafe, we tip over into fight or flight or freeze or fawn response. This is natural. This is our body's defense mechanism. It's how we've stayed safe for so long, right? Our nervous system gets hijacked by that part of the brain that is trying to keep us safe, this lower occipital area. And we often all have some natural response. Mine is to freeze. I'm a freezer. If I get tipped out of my window of tolerance, I'm going to freeze. For others, it might be to flee, to run away. For others, it might be to fight. For others, it might be to fawn, to try to coerce the situation to be different. But once we're in that space, we no longer feel safe. And it's very difficult to get a positive outcome, to feel positive about the outcome, even if our problem is solved in that session, right? Even if the problem we have brought to that professional is solved, it's very difficult to feel good about that outcome. And it can take a long time to settle our nervous system back down. Sometimes it imprints on us that it's not safe to be in those situations. And that happens, unfortunately, a lot in medical situations, and it happens in Reiki sessions. And I know that because I have seen it, I've experienced it on both sides of the table. Okay. Let us bring our slides back up. So what I'm doing is just kind of working us through some base information. This might not be new information to some of you. It might be new for some of you. It might be confusing. It might be, all over the board. So please do feel free to drop questions in the chat or reflections or insights that you have from your own experience. Really would love to be able to bring those things forward. And the chat technology allows us to do that. All right, so if we think specifically about a Reiki session, how might trauma, those places where some frightening or painful experience from our past has not been fully digested or integrated into our system, what might happen in a Reiki session specifically that might trigger those feelings, that might bring up that sense of our nervous system getting activated, that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response? Well, there's a variety of ways, many of which I did not think about when I first started on this journey. And Julia, yeah, physical reactions like tension or crying, absolutely. So there's aspects of the physical space that can cause some tension to arise for people. There's proximity or behavior of the practitioner, right? There is a lack of opportunity to give consent and make decisions about the experience. So if somebody is just moving through the session without asking, informing and asking. And there can be internal experiences that have absolutely nothing to do with what's going on around. That's just that person's, that's just what they're carrying into the session that day, right? And we don't have control over that, okay? And I want to just kind of say right now and probably reiterate that there is no way for us as a practitioner who's holding a space for people to come to us for these things, there's no way for us to account for everything that people might bring into the space. But what we can do is we can, again, go back to that idea of knowledge and information. We can learn about the sorts of things that are common and the sorts of things that we can easily, and sometimes with a little bit of effort, make adjustments in our protocols in order to account for the possibility and to make it less likely that we're going to be the source of some sort of distress for somebody. Yeah, touch is a huge one. We'll talk about that. And then, yeah, flashbacks, the idea a flashback where something happens that reminds us of that traumatic event, and then we feel like we're back in that scary event instead of in whatever we're in, like a Reiki session. So what might this look like? Some of you have named some of these things already. What might we observe as the practitioner in a person that is having this experience? Well, they might have a hesitancy to speak up. So that's the freeze response. So me, I'm a freezer. I'm going to stop responding, stop speaking up about my needs and my preferences. That's a really hard one for the practitioner, because then we don't know. We don't know what they need because they're not speaking up. They might develop an overly emphasized tendency to defer to you as a practitioner rather than to themselves. And that's, I think, also related to that freeze response, that like, I can't make a decision. I don't really know. I can't get in touch with what I think. And so you decide. There might be a subconscious sense of discomfort or distrust that inhibits the client's ability to relax. They might remain very tense, physically tense. I think one of you mentioned that. Sensations of fear or hyper-awareness, which shows up physiologically a lot of different ways. That feeling of being frozen, unable to communicate again. And then the sensation of being startled by touch. That's a really clear indication. If we touch somebody without asking their permission and they startle, that's a very clear indication that something is going on with their nervous system, and we need to back it up and really make sure that we have consent. So let's talk a little bit about this concept of triggers, a word that I've used a couple of times. And, essentially a trigger is an external source, an external stimulus that reminds the person of that past scary or painful experience. And not necessarily even reminding them in their conscious memory, but in their body, right? In their nervous system. And triggers can include all kinds of stuff. And again, disclaimer, we cannot account for all of them, and you're not expected to, right? But there is some things we can account for. But triggers can include particular scents, sounds, visual cues, words and phrases, physiological stimulus like touch, being in certain surroundings, and mannerisms, the mannerisms of people that they interact with. Now, it's certainly valuable and important for all of us to have some understanding of our internal landscape and to know the kinds of things that tend to trigger us. That's part of doing our own healing work, is to kind of understand the sorts of things that we might want to be on the lookout for, that we might want to adjust or advocate for, to navigate our own pathway through the world and to avoid triggers. However, we don't always know what they are. And advocating for ourselves can be, having difficulty advocating for ourselves can be also part of a trauma response. Oftentimes it is. And so as wellness professionals, as people who are intending to hold space for other people's healing and transformation and comfort and relaxation and all of the things that Reiki can do for us and that we want to bring to people through our practice, it really is part of our practice, I believe. I will put out there as truth, although others have disagreed with me in the past. I have gotten a lot of pushback on a lot of these topics. But I believe that it is part of our job. Like, it's literally part of the job description to create a space that, as much as we can, accounts for the possibility of these triggers and helps us to navigate what people might be bringing into the space so that everybody's safe, right? And has a good experience. So where does all of this leave us, right? There's this reality, right? And part of what we're up to here, let me just pull the curtain back. Part of what we are up to here is to normalize the reality that most of us have something that is unintegrated in our system. Statistically, upwards of 90% of us have experienced some significantly frightening or painful experience in our life. And I'm using the word significant, right? All of us have experienced something painful or frightening, 100% of us, right? about 90% statistically have experienced something significantly frightening or painful. And a fairly high percentage of those, I think it's around 20%. I don't have those statistics in front of me, but it's part of the material that we work with in this class, has not been able to fully integrate it and is therefore, in other words, walking around with some form of trauma that they're carrying that could potentially get triggered in a variety of situations. That's a lot of people. It's normal. It's not an outlying situation. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to shame other people for. It's not something to be afraid of as practitioners, right? It's not something for us to shy away from, ignore that it's there. And so where does that leave us as practitioners? Firstly, it leaves us in a really powerful position to help normalize this information, right? To help destigmatize the idea that we're not perfect and we're carrying things that can make us behave and feel in ways that feel off from normal, and that is in and of itself normal. And it puts us in a position of power and responsibility, right? Held in the container of compassion, non-judgment, the desire to serve that we talked about earlier. Power and responsibility to create containers for our practice that account for this and that are themselves a space where integration can happen, or at the very least is not interrupted. Because part of a Reiki session, a huge part of a Reiki session, is holding a space for ourselves and our clients' system, body, mind, heart, spirit, to do the work of balancing and healing that it is already doing. Each of us has a system that is designed to come back into balance, into wholeness, into equilibrium, into okayness, into the window of tolerance we talked about earlier. Our system is designed to get us there and is working on our behalf all the time to get us there. Our immune system always working to flush toxins out of our system, to repair broken tissues, to reduce inflammation, and so on. Our heart is always seeking that space of just gentle neutrality in our feelings, right? Our mind is trying to get back to a space of feeling settled. And that process is being interrupted all the time by the complexity of life, the dangers of the world, the vulnerabilities of our body, of our mind, of our heart. That's just normal. And a big part of a Reiki session is creating a container where those distractions are held at bay, and our system and our client's system, both of us there in the container together, can do that work of coming back into balance and equilibrium. And therefore, it's an important part of our job to ensure, as well as we can, that that container is at the very least neutral, if not beneficial. And here's the rub. Sometimes what we think is beneficial or neutral is actually threatening to other people. And again, we cannot know. And so we want to account for that. And so in the class, the longer class, which is a full day class, Cultivating a Trauma-Informed Reiki Practice, what we do is work through 10 different mindsets. We start with mindset. How are we perceiving our practice and what is happening and our clients? Mindsets, and then practices and protocols that flow from that mindset that we can easily integrate into our Reiki practice to account for all of these things we've been talking about. Not to say that we can make it a perfect situation for everyone. Not to say that you cannot have your own control over the container, but to say that we're going to shift our mindset in the ways that we've described. So let's talk a little bit more about what happens in the longer class. So in this class, you receive an accessible introduction to the biology of trauma. We've done a little bit of that today. So we go into much more depth and detail on the sorts of things that we've talked about in the first half of today's class. And we explore why embodiment practices like the system of Reiki are actually quite beneficial as part of trauma recovery. This is something that is more recently understood within the past couple of decades, and certainly in the past decade, that trauma is at the intersection of our body, our heart, and our mind. It cannot be fully resolved through talk therapy alone. It is embodied. Trauma is an embodied experience of having not digested the painful or frightening experience. So it's in the body. And therefore, practices that engage the body, and particularly practices that focus on integration between the body, the mind, the heart, the spirit, are incredibly beneficial, and I would say essential for true trauma recovery. Practices like yoga, like meditation, like martial arts, like dance, like music, like Reiki. We'll learn a series of practices and protocols that can be immediately and easily incorporated into your practice and or your teaching so that you can build a container of safety, choice, and consent for everybody who walks in your door, while minimizing overwhelm for you. And I want to emphasize that piece because for me, when I first, as I mentioned, I'd had some really kind of confusing and frightening experiences early on in my Reiki practice that I now understand were a person's trauma being triggered, and I didn't know how to interpret that or navigate it. And once I realized what was happening and I learned about some of these pieces, I got very overwhelmed and I felt like, should I even be doing this? Should I even be doing Reiki if I could possibly hurt people? Because, at the bottom, when it comes down to it, if a person is pushed into a traumatic response, it can cause more harm, right? I mean, we can cause harm inadvertently, unintentionally, if we're not careful, right? And that's true of any practice that asks a person to be with us in a way that is vulnerable and intimate around things that matter to them, which absolutely happens in a Reiki session, right? We're asking people to come to us, to trust us, to be vulnerable, to be intimate around things that matter to them. Any job, any role that asks people to do that creates the possibility of harm. And that's just reality. We don't have to be afraid of that, but we do want to be prepared. And we do want to be able to account for our own needs in that scenario. We don't want to go into a place of overwhelm. We don't want to go into a place of feeling triggered or upset, right? We matter in this scenario too, right? Our needs and our need for safety and trust matter also. So we will address that. We will also practice mindsets, right? So I mentioned it actually begins with mindsets. I should flip those two bullet points because it actually begins with mindsets that form what we're calling a trauma-informed practice without feeling pressure that you have to directly treat trauma. In fact, unless we have been trained as a trauma professional, we should not be directly treating trauma. And that's one of the mindsets that we'll work on so that you can unlock deeper healing and empowerment for your clients, for yourself, whether or not they come to you with trauma. Because let's be honest, the things that we're going to be talking about in this class, the mindsets and practices and protocols, they're valuable to anybody, whether or not they're walking in with trauma. These things are just good for all of us, right? It's not just for trauma. It's just good practice. We will explore the connections between oppressive systems in society and trauma. Oppressive systems like racism, sexism, transphobia, classism, the structures in our society that put pressure and unequal, unfair pressure on certain groups of people are a significant source of trauma. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to look at strategies for beginning to interrupt those systems in the way we structure our Reiki practice. This is actually a topic that really needs its own deep dive. So I'll just, full disclosure, the amount of time we're able to spend on this particular piece in this one-day class does not do it justice, but it's a really important one to have in our perspective. And maybe someday we'll create a deep dive into that subject as well. And we'll learn simple interventions. I mean simple, to support a client who becomes triggered. And the reason I emphasize simple is that, again, we're not there to treat their trauma, but if somebody gets pushed out of their window of tolerance and they go into a place that, you know, they're activated, or they're not able to relax, or they're feeling afraid, or maybe they have a panic attack, right? I do want you to have some simple techniques to help intervene with that. Even though we're not there to treat trauma, that can happen. That can happen in any situation. I've had students in situations that, you know, in academic classes who went into panic attacks for reasons I don't even have any idea why, right? And it was a great relief to me to have some simple interventions that I could offer for them. And you will receive a 77-page workbook detailing all of what we talk about, containing all of the teaching materials, practices, activities, tools for integrating a trauma-informed lens into your Reiki practice. And that will be emailed to you before class. So let's just take a look at these 10 mindsets. I'm just going to show you the list right from the table of contents in the book. So these 10 mindsets that we'll be exploring in more detail in the class is, first and foremost, self-practice. Begins with our self-practice. Secondly, empowerment-based and invitational language and how we invite choice for our clients as a way of being. Setting boundaries for our clients and for ourselves. Acknowledging the expert in the room. Informed consent. Modifications. The possibilities are endless. Reiki is super flexible. That's one of the things I love about it. There's not a whole lot about a Reiki session that is fixed in stone, that absolutely has to happen a particular way. That is not true of a lot of, you know, medical processes, right? Let's see, Karma, I'm going to circle back to your question in a sec. Reiki is incredibly flexible. We can make all kinds of modifications. We can offer all kinds of options. However, that's not necessarily true in all fields, right? I mean, if you are a phlebotomist and your job is to take blood from people in a medical setting, which one of my students in a past trauma-informed Reiki class was, she said, but I can't avoid touching the person. I can't avoid sticking them with a needle. That's essential for the job. You can't avoid those things, but what you can do is ask their consent first, even if it feels like a formality, because you have to do it. But they could say no. Now that's going to end your session, right? You can't do your job if the person says no to being stuck with a needle in that situation. But most likely they're there for a reason. They're going to say yes. And what happens to their nervous system when they're in a anxiety-provoking situation and they're asked consent before that scary thing happens? What happens is that process of being asked consent and then giving consent, it signals to their system to let the guards stand down, right? Because their nervous system is gearing up for battle or for running away, right? That tension, that anxiety, that flood of adrenaline is your body getting ready for battle. And when you're asked consent and you give consent, it tells your nervous system to stand down, to settle down, right? It makes a huge impact on our nervous system when we are asked and given consent, even for something that there's really no other option. But again, I digress. Reiki, very flexible. There's lots of modifications. To emphasize the point I just made, consent to touch is a special topic within modifications that we'll go into in great detail. The physical container, how to create a physical space that is trauma-informed. Power dynamics, cultural considerations, and accessibility. And finally, remaining with your client grounded and open to feedback. Okay, Karma, you asked, so this is in addition to our Reiki practice. Say more about what you mean about that question. You can come off mute or you can drop it back in the chat. Just want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. And then Tina.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much. So I was asking, this is supplemental to our Reiki practice, correct? So we
Yes.
would not be okay. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, right? Who is this for? That question.
So I was just making sure
For?
it wasn't. I was just making sure you weren't going over Reiki
Right.
again. Not that will be a problem. It's not a problem.
Absolutely.
But
Yes. Oh, that's a great question.
thank you.
Yeah, so this is material that is assuming that you have some form of Reiki practice. It doesn't have to be professional practice. It doesn't have to be your job, but in some context, you are working with other people, right? Your Reiki practice is beyond self-practice. This is also helpful for other forms of embodiment-based practices, cranial sacral work, acupuncture, just any number of related fields. This, very similar material is going to be valuable, but I am honing it in for things that are specific to Reiki. Yeah, great question. And Tina, thanks for the endorsement, Tina. She says she took this class. It's been exceptionally helpful in empowering my clients, which makes me feel empowered because I'm truly able to hold space for them. And many of the questions they have are answered in the consent part of the session. Yes, this is about developing protocols and structures flowing from mindsets that make our job easier, make it easier to provide good care to our clients. Thank you for that, Tina. Okay, please note, disclaimer, asterisk, this course does not teach you how to directly treat trauma with Reiki. So there's a distinction here between trauma treatment and being trauma informed in the Reiki treatments you're providing. So we're doing the second, the latter. We are not doing the former. As I said before, unless you have been trained as a trauma professional, we should not be directly treating trauma, meaning, hey, bring me your trauma, let's treat it, right? We need some specialized training for that. That goes well beyond the scope of this class, okay? Rather, you will learn how to incorporate mindsets, practices, protocols that increase opportunities for clients and students to feel safe, empowered, and in control of their healing, regardless of whether or not they come to you with trauma. Okay, what is this class and when is it and where is it and how is it? Well, when it is September 23rd from 9 to 5. It's a full day on Zoom with a lunch break. You will receive that 77-page workbook that I mentioned via email with the opportunity to purchase a physical copy, and you will receive a recording of the class. So you can review it whenever you like. The investment in the class is $185. I do offer a sliding scale. I believe there is one ticket left at this time at the $165 price. And for those of you sweet people who have joined me in this preview class, I'd like to offer you a discount, $20 off either ticket. I didn't even put the promo code in here. I will be sending out an additional email with the recording of this class, and that will include the discount. But in case you wanted to note it, it is simply SAVE20, SAVE, capital letters, the number 20, all as one word, SAVE20. If you register for this class, we'll get you $20 off either of those tickets as your investment in deepening this work. Okay, wow, look at that, right on time. We are 3 minutes away from our closing time. So in those 3 minutes, if there's any other questions or reflections, yes, Karma, that question was really helpful. Thank you, Tina, for affirming that. Let's see. Yes, thank you for clarifying. You are very welcome. I missed a comment. I think this would be great for me. I'm starting First public PTSD support group for women, yes, in January, and many of them are drawn to me because of my lived experiences. I don't want to treat anyone's trauma, but this is a good add-on. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So what we'll go over in this class will absolutely be applicable to something like a PTSD support group. Of course, we're going to be focusing on things specific to Reiki, but these are concepts that are generalized, right? In fact, I've distilled many of these from the incredible work that's already been done in the fields of yoga and mindfulness meditation around trauma-informed work. My teachers and mentors in those realms have greatly increased my life in these ways. And and their work is cited in the distillation into a Reiki specific form. But all of the perspectives that we'll be going over, absolutely applicable across a wide range of experiences, including a PTSD support group. Yeah. Okay. Well, friends, thank you so, so much. Oh, wait, more that I forgot. My clients love the consent form I made. Oh, I'm so glad, Tina. We workshopped that together. I was nervous about sharing it with them, but the response has been 100% positive. Yeah. Again, having good structures makes it easier. Makes it easier for them because they can see what's happening. Makes it easier for you because a lot of that work has already been done on the front end, and you're just sharing it over and over again. All right, friends. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Please do reach out if any other questions come up for you around this material, and I'd love to continue the conversation. This work is incredibly dear to me. It has absolutely deeply improved my life as a person and also my practice as a Reiki practitioner. I feel so much stronger and more confident in offering Reiki, having these mindsets and protocols in place. And it's just such a joy to share it with all of you. It matters to me that this matters to you. And that's actually the last question I'd like to leave you with, to just take into your day to reflect on. And that is simply the question, why does this matter? Why does this work matter? Why does it matter to you personally? Why does it matter in the world? Why does it matter to the people that you come into contact with? Just invite you to reflect on that question as you go through your day, right? Because we don't want to take for granted what has heart and meaning to us, right? It can be very anchoring to truly know why something matters to us. So I offer you that question. I offer you this work. I offer you the opportunity to be in touch with me if you have any questions. I've put a lot of content about this on my YouTube channel. I'll have a link for that in the email if you want to dive into more. And thank you so much for being with me. I really appreciate it. I'll be back next month with another topic in our free monthly class series. And I don't know what that topic is yet, but it'll be up on the website soon. So friends, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.